This is Zach Log the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Nate.
Oh.
And also Travis.
Hello.
And we are getting together tonight to talk about John Donne's Holy Sonnet 14, also known by the first title, Batter My Heart, three-person God. First line, not first title. Before we get to that, I did want to say thank you to Ann H for supporting me on Subscribestar. And if you like my work and you would like to help me keep doing this, you can visit subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great and sign up to there's a few monthly subscription levels there. And the link will be in the description. Having said that, neither of my fine friends volunteered to read the poem tonight, so it will be up to me. And where's share screen? There's share screen. Okay. So let me know when you guys see that.
There it is.
Yep, looks good.
Okay. All right. Holy Sonnet 14 by John Donne. Batter my heart, three-personed God, for you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. That I may rise and stand, o'erthrow me and bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. I, like an usurped town, to another do labor to admit you, but oh, to no end. Reason your viceroy and me should defend, but is captived, and proves weak or untrue. Yet dearly I love you, and would be loved fain, but I am betrothed unto your enemy. Divorce me, untie, or break that knot again. Take me to you, imprison me, for I, except you enthrall me, shall never be free, nor ever chaste, except you ravish me. Okay. And, Travis, since this is your first appearance of the new year, would you like to start us off here?
Probably not, but I'll give it a go anyhow. So it's interesting. There's very powerful language there at the beginning. You know, forced to break, blow, burn, and make me new. And that's kind of what I was struck by when I read it the first time. I was like, wow, he really jumps in there. But as I as I went back and tried to sort of understand it a little bit, it's interesting because before he gets to that line, we're talking about God knocking, breathing, shining, and he's saying, as yet, this is all you do, and seek to mend. But it seems like what he really wants him to do is, in order that he may rise and stand, basically, be a man or a good man, he wants God to overthrow him and bend, break, blow, burn, and make him new. Yeah, so that'll be my opening. I'll let somebody else take it from there.
Nate, how about you?
It's a very good picture of what you've got to do to really submit to the work of God. He's like, God will knock on the door, you'll feel his breath, see his light, and he's trying to repair you. But it's better if you say, look, God, I will submit myself to you. I will throw myself at your feet, and you do what you have to do. I subordinate my will and myself to your process. At that point, God will very often just take out the hammers and be like, oh, perfect. He'll start beating you in the shape. And this is a very genuine cry from someone who like really has a deep desire to know the deep things of God. Like this is a person who is looking to build a mature and powerful faith rather than, just sort of sit on the surface of doctrines, to actually get down into it and really become something with the Spirit. And so this person is in for a lot of turmoil, I'm afraid, because when you ask God to do these things, that's fine, but He's going to have to clear out some stuff. He may not want to go easily, and also the enemy's going to be like, well, hold on a minute. As John Donne said, this town, this territory is mine. What are you doing?
Yeah, and it actually reminds me, not that long ago I listened to, where do I have it? I have it here somewhere. Yeah, there we go. I found an audiobook version of this old guy, and I was listening to that again, and it's interesting that, like, there's one part in there where he's like, in terms of, like, the Christian life, and in terms of God's plan for you, you can think of it a little bit like you were a house that was kind of run down, and then, like, someone comes along and buys this house and is going to fix it up, and you're like, and the first thing they do is, they tear down those old gutters and install new ones, and you're like, good, that needed done. Wasn't great. And then they rip up the torn linoleum and start laying down new flooring. You're like, that's fantastic. And then at some point he starts knocking out walls, and he starts installing new wings of the house, and you're like, wait, what are you doing? This wasn't the what was supposed to go on. And he says, most of us, most of the time, don't actually that much agree with God's plan for us. Because most of us, the great majority of the time, just want to be good enough. And we don't want to push ourselves past that. God does not want us to be good enough. God wants us to be saints. That is His plan. And, if you put yourself in His hands, that is, where He's going to take you. And considering where you're starting, it's probably not going to be very fun. So, yeah, that was one of the first things I thought about with this one.
Yeah,
So to go back to your, go ahead, Nate.
No, by all means, Travis, take it.
So I was gonna say, to go back to your metaphor from Mere Christianity about the house. So clearly, in that situation, there was a failure of communication between the contractor and the homeowner. Someone did not plan it out ahead of time, or else communicate it to the homeowner.
In the story, he's not talking about I'm the person, like, you're the person who owns the house. He's talking about you as you are the house that needs to be fixed. And by the way, if you were a house and someone was fixing you in this way,
you wouldn't have any real choice.
Well, that too, but
we up ghosts and haunts and whatnot.
Well, yes, that too, but also, like, if someone was doing these things, it probably wouldn't feel especially good. Right. If a house could feel pain, you would be going through a lot of it on the way to being the house he wants.
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
And and so this is actually I just checked a minute ago, and this is actually one of the first poems I recorded and posted for this channel. In fact, it was posted uh, 6 years ago, as of 3 days, like 6 years and 3 days ago. So I also look just a little bit different in that video. I don't. I apparently am aging well so far. But if you look close, I do. You can tell there are a few changes. And now I'm being vain, but this is what you get when you record YouTube videos and you spend way too much time looking at your own face. It's probably not healthy. Um,
Little window over there, and I don't have to look at my face. Oh, Dad, I can't see my face by accident. No, but this,
every morning you go to the bathroom and you go to the mirror to brush your teeth and you look in the mirror like, oh God, now I'm awake.
oh, it's more like a pitying chuckle. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I see myself in the mirror and I'm like, okay, I'm going back to bed.
Not as much of an option for either of us. We have things we have duties that keep us moving whether we want to or not.
Yeah. This poem though, this poem kind of like it's not gonna end in ease, anything like this. It kind of points towards perhaps the most important thing I've ever talked about, which is my video "Dangerous God," and because when you really submit yourself to God like this, as you say, he's going to make changes. He's going to pull things out, stick new things in. He's going to repaint you, rewire you. Maybe put a new roof up there. He's going to. Your floor plan's going to be real different. And then going forward, you might not be a house anymore. You might be a hospital. You might be a sanctuary. You might be a Chinese place. You never know. But God, full reign to do with your life as he sees fit, and it's not going to be comfortable. He may call you to do everything from minister to die. And so, people that say things like this and then ask God to really come in and bend his full force and make them really feel his will and move them, I don't ask that lightly. Dear listener, there are a lot of ways to be a mediocre Christian and sail through and live a life of relative ease. And he has bigger targets than you. So most of the time, you'll just sort of get the blow-by of what he's trying to do. But if you want to be serious and make a difference, you've got to understand that when God breaks, blows, and burns to make you new, that is deep and comprehensive breaking. Those blows there are hurricanes. That burning will melt you to the core. You will find yourself liquefied and recast into an entirely new shape. But you will be new. He will then put you on the anvil and beat you into the right shape to be the tool he wants you to be. So, this is a wonderful poem. This is a beautiful sentiment. This is a dangerous invitation that you need to think very carefully about. But this is also the gate toward high purpose.
It's kind of it also. Oh. The other thing that just occurred to me was I never finished a book by St. Augustine. I started The City of God with a group of friends, and stuff interfered, and I didn't get to stick with the reading group. I started the Confessions on my own and made it like maybe a quarter of the way through, and something distracted me. But there's a quote attributed to him. I don't know, probably from Confessions, and he said, when I was younger, I would often pray to God, God, please make me chaste. God, please make me chaste. Um, it wasn't until later that I realized that I was always silently adding in my heart afterwards, but not just yet. It's uh, that sounds a little too familiar. That sounds a little too like, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about, Mr. Augustine, and uh, anyway,
Yeah, well, this guy's trying to get beyond that, it seems, for sure.
well, and it's since this is a sonnet, and since this is a well done sonnet, it has those three sections, and it has the 2-line turn at the end, and it is kind of interesting how the three sections work, because it's the first section is God, please start this seriously, and then the second section, the second 4 lines, um, he talks about himself as a town that is under enemy rule. And he says, like, I have reason. By the way, atheists, Christians are not opposed to reason. That's a really stupid idea. We think reason points to God, points to Jesus, and serves him. But he says, reason should defend me. I have this reason. It is supposed to be your servant, but either my reason is weak or it has been suborned, and it betrays me. um and it's like, oh, well, yes, you kind of really probably shouldn't do that thing, but you've had a rough day, and you know perhaps just this one thing wouldn't hurt, and we can definitely stop before we get to worse stuff. And it's like, reason can turn to rationalization far too easily. And it's also kind of interesting, and I can think of prominent examples from the world today, that, like, someone who is pretty intelligent, but does not want to accept the truth, then that intelligence is going to be used to turn help them hide from the truth. It's a gift, but it's a gift that can be abused. And if it is, you're worse off than if you were just kind of dumb. So, Nate, you were saying something you wanted to.
Sorry. No, I was just making a comment about, yeah, that slope doesn't look that slippery. We can just take a couple of steps on it, no problem. But I mean, I do like how in the end of this, it last 4 lines particularly, it really points, it kind of gives an explanation of the whole idea. These two sort of contrary points that Christians believe: that one, we allow ourselves to be slaves to Christ and slaves to God and the Spirit, but at the same time, in that we are free. And so this guy points to it again. The idea that has been fascinating is that the freedom that God gives when we subordinate ourselves to Him, we choose, hey, God, you're in charge. And so we are now free to pursue this we really want to pursue, to become better, to live the moral life we want rather than be enslaved to pettiness and greed and, the flesh. And so I love that, except you enthrall me, never shall be free, nor ever chaste, except you ravish me. Unless God comes in here and throws aside our objections and just bursts to the core of us, always going to be a wayward We're always going to be wayward scum. We're always going to be pursuing the wrong and the evil and all of that because that's our nature. And so I have to be, taken captive and led away from the nature I was born with to actually know the freedom of morality and purpose. It's amazing.
Yeah, and you can be free to do thing X, but you can be free to indulge all kind of vices, but at the same time, someone who is captured by their vices, someone who is ruled by pride, by gluttony, by addiction to alcohol or drugs, that person is not free. The hard road of virtue is the only path of freedom. And it does seem, it ends kind of, John Donne puts this as a paradox. Except you enthrall me, except you enslave me, basically, I shall never be free. But service to God, and in terms of being virtuous, is the only path of freedom. Someone who is ruled by lust, someone who is ruled by his stomach, someone who is ruled by drug addiction, that person is not free. And that person will do things that later they look back on, they're like, what, why? For the love of God, why did I do that? Deep. Go ahead.
Sorry. The slave mindset there is so easy to see, because they'll do something, they'll betray someone, do something terrible, and they're like, well, I was X, I was drunk, I was high, I was this or that. And I'm like, okay. And they treat it like I was just following orders. I can't help it. I have to do this. And that shows the real slavery. You never hear about Christians betraying someone or, causing epic destruction and being like, well, I was, it's like, well, I was, I was caught up in the spirit. I cheated on my wife because God told me to.
I will say I could totally hear that one coming from a televangelist, but I generally don't hold them in esteem. So
you do something like that, and you're like, now it's like, now that's blasphemous. You know better. Everyone knows better. Just tell the truth.
So when he speaks of the reason as his viceroy, and it should defend him, what do you imagine he's referring to as far as reason?
Reason is if give me a minute. If go ahead.
He means his reason, his ability to think, his faculty of consideration. And it should be, the thing that helps you go, oh, well, I know that, God's purposes are better, his callings are higher, and this goes against them. This thing that I want to do goes against them. And so, because I know that his purposes are higher and his ends are better, I shouldn't do this thing that crosses against what God desires for me. So that should be how the reason defends you. But many times we'll take that reason and go, well, is there a way I can, as Sean said, turn reason into justification? Can I twist this? Can I make this where, no, it's not against God. It's okay for me to do this. And so, like I said, reason you should be able to compare what you're being offered by this sinful opportunity versus what it is that God offers you for, your service and, your obedience, and decide that, oh yeah, no, this would be a terribly foolish thing to do. But instead, most of the time, we use our reason to try and figure out some kind of a loophole.
Well, yeah, and the other thing with that, and you don't even have to be a Christian to notice this. You just have to have some level of self-awareness. When you do something, when reason is subverted into rationalization, and you do something that at some level is not what you're supposed to do. For me, almost always, maybe a minute later, maybe an hour later, maybe a day later, I'll look back and I'll be like, I knew that was not what I was supposed to do. I knew that if I did that I would not be happy with it. I knew I could have known from past experience that this set of actions would result in this consequence, and that consequence is not what I want. But somehow I did it anyway. And to go back to reason, your viceroy in me. The reason is that supposed to be the viceroy of God. God, the Christian God is not the Muslim God. Okay, the God Muslims believe in is arbitrary. And the world continues as it does moment to moment because that is what God wills it every moment. When you strike a match, the match does not light up because that is the laws of because that's the way, that is the world he created, and it has consistent laws. It is because that is what he wills at that moment. Christians believe that God is reasonable, that God is the source of our reason, and so if he is the source, then our reason should work as a servant for him. But again, it can be suborned and it can be corrupted, and that very same thing can, instead of defending us, be used to betray us to the enemy. And I am quite familiar with that process.
I'm not even sure if you necessarily need to usurp it, or like with rationalization. I mean, with your head, oh, this is what I really should do, or what I want to do, or what's good for me, but you just go and do the other thing anyhow because it's easy, it's there, it feels good.
I mean, there is sometimes
it sets up, sort of, your higher mind and your lower mind, or
I mean, there is sometimes when it's that direct, but there are also sometimes where you talk yourself into it, where you do, use the gift of reason God has given you to, justify it. Or at least, for me, there's sometimes where you can, what's the phrase? I've seen the phrase used sometimes where you can, where looking back you can see the rationalization hamster running on its wheel inside your head. So, it's actually kind of funny. This is, obviously this is, an excellent expression of this a powerful expression of this problem. This was written about 400 years ago, and we're still talking about it today. It actually, though, reminds me of a rather more recent one from a Christian rock group Probably not still together because this was like 20 years ago, but they had a song. It was Lost Dogs was the group, and they have a song called "Diamonds to Coal." And he says, and the first font line is, "Go ahead and do it, Lord. Turn my diamonds to coal." There's that there's all these other things. Oh, sorry, one moment.
I can't hear you, Sean.
We back? There we are. Are we back?
No, yeah, no, I hear you.
Okay. What was the last thing I said before I disappeared?
There's a song on "Turn My
Diamonds to coal.
Okay, yeah, and the first line is, "Go ahead and do it, Lord. Turn my diamonds to coal." And it's there's all these other things that I value. There's all these other things that I trust. There's all these other things that are the focus of my life. And if that's what it has to be, God, take these away so that all I have is you. And it's a little bit of that, for a little bit the same as that first stanza. It's like, God, you've been fairly gentle with me so far, and I'm kind of worried that maybe this isn't going to be enough. So, if there's some hard work to be done, let's get to it. And it's and I think that's the same kind of thing as between that song and that poem.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same sort of thing Paul was talking about. He's like, I think it was Paul. Lord, I could be wrong about that. New Testament writer saying that it's like, no, I don't think it was. He's saying that, look, the things that I want to do, I don't. The things that I know I don't want to do are the things I do. It's like, why? Because our hearts are evil. They're always going. Our desires and our flesh is always going to fight us, and we're gonna. This is something we have to stand up to every day of our life, and it sounds a lot like this. So it's not just this from 400 years ago. It's that all same sentiment from 2,000 years ago.
It is Paul, by the way. It's I recognized it. It's Romans chapter 7. I don't have it memorized. I knew roughly where it was, so I knew where to look. So I looked it up really quick. Romans chapter 7 verse 21. So I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. What a wretched man I am! Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death?
Yeah.
What interpretation or whatever is that? I'm not familiar with that wordage. It's what?
It's NIV.
It is NIV?
Yeah, the other thing is, like, they had apparently a new edition out in 2011. So I think the phrasing is just slightly different. From there have been apparently so far 4 editions of the NIV, and they're 90% the same, but like the one I am most familiar with is the one from 1984, apparently. And so yeah, there's the wording is just slightly different than what I was expecting, but
I like the New King James.
I don't know about you peasants. I read all of these in the original languages from the original text, which I have all of them over there intact, like the whole thing.
Huh? That's getting paid then. been part of this thing for years. If you got that kind of dough, I'm gonna get a contract going.
Anyway, but yeah, and it is, this, fascinating, contradiction in, in our humanity, that like apparent freedom, apparent liberty, can so quickly lead to a very real kind of enslavement. Um, a man is free to choose to take his first shot of heroin. For most people, they are not free not to choose to take their fifth shot. By that point, most people have lost the ability to choose otherwise. And it is, like I said, this strange contradiction. If you want to be free, you have to limit yourself. Or as he says, allow God to, place to limit you, by submitting to him, which is not fun, but is not fun for the time, but leads somewhere far, far better. So let's see. Another thing, and I did not see this until I think one of my English teachers pointed me out when we were in college, when we were going over this poem. For you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. And then it's use your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. Those are actually the same action. It's actually the same actions, more intensified. Instead of knocking on the door, he's breaking it. Instead of breathing, on something, he's blowing. Instead of shining a light on it, he's burning it. And instead of seeking to mend, instead of trying to fix it, it's making the whole thing over again. Which is, kind of interesting parallel there.
Yeah, it is. I hadn't noticed that.
Okay, well, I think I've said most of what I wanted to cover about this poem. Travis, how about you? Are there any things you would like to add tonight?
I think I've said sufficiently little. I don't have a lot to add to what we've said.
Okay. Nate, how about you? Any last thoughts tonight?
We're all gonna serve somebody. Every last one of us. We're born free, but eventually we find a master. So think hard. Use that reason to find a master that's going to lead you to good places.
Well, that sounds like a good note to close on. So, thank you both for joining me tonight, and God be with you.
Also with you.